not knock over your bell.
Yeah, it's heavy and hurt your foot.
Well, hi everybody. Thank you for the warm introduction, Amy, and for your volunteerism also at Guiding Eyes. As Amy mentioned, and thank you all for having us here today to share about Guiding Eyes and our work for guide dogs with people who are blind. So I'm going to break up this, I will keep it brief so as not to put you all to sleep because I don't know how much coffee there is in here. But I'm going to start a little bit about Regal and I and move on into how Regal or any other guide dog comes to be, and a couple of do's and don'ts when you see a guide dog out in the world, and how, if you are so inclined, you can learn more about getting involved. So as Amy mentioned, Regal is my guide dog. I am officially a blind person, or a person who's blind. So if you all are wondering, that I can just tell that there's like a little bit of life in here. So that's my MO. Regal came to me in 2017. My story starts before that. As Amy mentioned, I was in New York City. I was working in the nonprofit space. I was losing my vision, and Regal, chill out and lay down. Aww. Regal likes she knows I keep treats in my pocket. And then I constantly smell like salmon. I promise it's the treats. So I was working in New York City at a nonprofit, and was using a white cane, and didn't particularly like it, but someone would always tell me, you should try getting a guide dog. They had a guide dog from Guiding Eyes, and I thought, I was new to the city. I'd been in West Virginia for a long time before that, so there's a lot more space out there, and had dogs growing up, but I didn't know how a big lab would do in a little Brooklyn apartment. Fast forward a few months, and I was climbing over a giant snowdrift. In New York City, they love to pile the snowdrifts on the corner of the block, especially when you get to the outer boroughs. They're like, they'll figure it out. So I was climbing over this snowdrift to get to work, and I climbed the wrong way, and I ended up completely disoriented. I was basically diagonally across from the place I worked at. And I thought it was like 4 degrees, and so I thought, oh my gosh, I'm just gonna freeze to death here. They're gonna just find this person. I was a little melodramatic, but that was really what caused me to think, I'm gonna go get a guide dog. And I immediately went to Guiding Eyes and nowhere else. So I applied for my guide dog that night. Now that's been several years ago. Regal's my second guide dog. What I will say is that the difference for me was night and day. I had a full 180. I felt like I could really take on the world, and I really have. So Regal and myself, since 2017, we've been on countless flights. We've been across the country, back again. We go out down into New York City. You should see this dog get me through Grand Central. I walk off the train and say, okay, Regal, and she knows exactly where to go to get out of the station. I don't even have to tell her anything. She's so amazing about getting me around obstacles, finding things. I've taught her, my mailbox. She knows my office at work. She knows so many things that just make life easier. And so really, I'm just one person out of 150 plus who get these amazing dogs a year, and about 900 people from Guiding Eyes alone who have working guide dogs in the US and Canada. So the dogs, how do they get to be where they're Regal? So it really all starts at the Canine Development Center in Paterson, New York, just over the border. And we breed all of our own dogs. We breed them for health and temperament, and we're really, really careful about that. Our breeding program is decades old. It's quite old, and we take actually the DNA from every single one of our dogs, kind of keep track of it. Every dog, when they're born, gets what's called an estimated breeding value, which is like a report card on that dog and all of its litter. So if something should happen within the litter or within the dog, let's say it gets an ear infection, let's say one of the dogs is noise sensitive, that will affect that report card, so we can continue to improve the future generations of guide dogs. When the puppies are born, it's all about love and human bonding and touch from the very beginning, at 1 week old, we do puppy massage, and they get massaged every day by either staff or volunteers. Yes, that is a volunteer opportunity. Little tiny puppies, they get rolled in because they're so small, their eyes aren't open, but they're feeling that beauty of human touch. When they're a few weeks old and they are able to kind of wean off their mother a bit more, they start to explore the world even more. And this is still at the Canine Development Center, and they will do something called early socialization, because when they're really, really little, their brains, just like babies, are like sponges. And we want to give them as many experiences as we can so that they're comfortable in a wide variety of environments. So all the time, there's always some kind of sound playing, no matter any time of day. It can be anything from The Little Mermaid, to fireworks, to a jackhammer, to a baby's crying, to heavy metal, to reggae. I guess I've heard the dogs really love that. They are exposed to hearing these sounds all the time so that they grow up with them. And then in the early socialization, again, we rely on our volunteers and our staff, and they will take these dogs through, it's basically coordinated playtime in our center. And the dogs have lots of different things they can climb on, they can play with their siblings, they can, experience different textures and just really develop their brains. When the puppies are about 6 weeks old, they start to do something called home socialization, and Amy has done this also. And we send 2 and 3 puppies out at a time to volunteer homes, and they'll take the puppies for 3 to 5 days. And basically, they have a checklist of experiences to show the puppy, to get them to have build that memory bank in their brain. So it could be anything from turning on the dishwasher, running the vacuum, letting them feel this certain thing, exposing them to a child, all these different things. And then our volunteers will make note on how the puppies reacted to it. Were they a little nervous? Did they get the zoomies? Did they really not carry their way? All those are super important for that puppy's development. And they'll go on one of these outings 2 or 3 times in a couple of weeks. When they are about 8 weeks old, the puppies will take what we call a puppy test. And this is an observed situation where the dogs are exposed to a variety of what we call novel objects and textures, weird underfootings that will open have a small umbrella near them, we'll have a small fan turn on. We want to see, how is this puppy going to react? They shake a can of coins, what's going to happen? Some of the puppies will kind of show that they really can't handle that level of stress. About 85 to 90% say, all right, let's go, let's move on to the next phase. And then the other 10 to 15% will either possibly go to a different service dog organization, or they might be adopted out as family pets. So now the dogs are 8 weeks old, and they go to another volunteer home. They go to the loving homes of their puppy raisers. And we actually have about 39 regions. They span from Maine down to North Carolina. They go as far west as Ohio, and there's even just a few people that do it out in Colorado. And so what our puppy raisers do is they take these dogs into their homes for 12 to 15 months, and they teach them the fundamentals of being a good dog, right? So it's like grade school or K through 12 for the dog, and they're learning how basic obedience. They're learning how to be, good at home. Okay, no, you can't eat the socks. You can't get up on the counters when you want to. They're getting tons of love from the puppy raisers and their families, and they're being exposed to so many things through what we call socialization outings, which is not go meet every dog that you'd ever like to meet. It's let's sit here and watch people come in and out of the shopping center. Let's take a walk by this busy road. Okay, let's go to the grocery store, to the bank, or providing more and more of those experiences so that the dog, again, is comfortable in a wide variety of settings. So once the puppy is about 15 to 18 months old, now they're ready for their college entrance exams, and they come back to Guiding Eyes in Yorktown Heights. So these dogs are coming back from, Ohio or North Carolina or Westchester County or Connecticut or wherever, and they come back and they take what's called an in-for training test, which is, again, like the puppy test, but everything's bigger. So we ask the dogs to walk over different underfootings. We turn on a fan. We open an umbrella near them. We turn on a big old clanky vacuum cleaner type thing. They get a mock vet exam. They try on the guide dog harness. There's an unusual looking person that's all costumed up that will come and say hi. And again, we want to see what the dog's reactions are to all this. Are they resilient? It's okay if they react, but can they come back to the center state and be able to move forward? So most of those dogs will go on to what we call formal harness training. Some of them will be evaluated to be future breeders, because again, we do breed our own dogs. We work with some other guide dog organizations to keep everything diverse, but we want to make sure the cream of the crop produce the next generation of guide dogs. During formal harness training, this is a minimum of 5 months. It can be upwards of a year or even more. And each dog is assigned to a guide dog trainer, and that trainer will take the dog for that time, and through hundreds of repetitions, will teach the dog how to be a guide dog. So it starts with touching their nose to the stick, and they get a treat. And it's a really fun game because labs especially love to eat. And so they keep touching their nose to the stick, and then once they really got it, now we're translating that into put your feet up on a curve. Okay, now identify a stare. And then they learn how to pull out in a harness, right? It's different than what we want pet dogs to do. We want them to walk right beside us. Well, a guide dog needs to walk about 2 steps in front of you. So we teach them that, and then we begin to teach them how to make turns on command, and then we teach them, how to react if, cars coming towards them, and hey, don't walk off the train platform. All of these things are taught so that when they're in the real world, they can successfully and safely guide a person who is blind. It starts off in Yorktown Heights, goes all the way to New York City, and the dogs will just continue building their skills. We have a couple of programs in addition to our regular guide dog training. We have a running guide dog program. So for people who like to run and don't want to always have to rely on a human guide or the treadmill, we have guide dogs who can run with their person. And we have a specialized training program for people who are blind and have additional challenges. For example, maybe they're deafblind, or maybe they have a balance problem or a cognitive impairment, so we work and really train those dogs for that individual also. When the dogs are ready, they've passed their test, they passed what's called the final blindfold. Now it's time to match them with a person who they will guide. And so while the dogs are training, we're actually working with the people who are going to get the dogs. At any given time, we have 200 people waiting for their guide dog. Every month we get probably approximately 30 new applicants, and we try to, get 15 guide dogs out the door, These are about half new and half returning, right? Because unfortunately, guide dogs don't work forever. They want to retire too. When we're training the dogs, we're also talking to people like me. We have a home interview. Someone from Guiding Eyes comes out, they come and take a look, like, where do you live? Do you live in New York City? Do you live on a farm? We literally have every extreme. What do you do? Do you work in an office? Are you a busy college student? Are you retired? Do you have a gaggle of kids? There's all these different things. What pets do you have? Do you have pets? Do you not have pets? Do you have farm animals? Yes, it's a thing. And we also track the person's pace. So we'll do a walk with that individual, clock how fast do you comfortably walk. That's a huge part of the matching process, because you want the dog to walk as fast as or a little bit faster than that person, because at the end of the day, you can slow a fast dog down, but you can't speed a slow dog up. So if we pair somebody who walks 3 miles an hour with a dog that walks 2.5 miles an hour, that partnership's not going to be successful. So it's a little bit like like Matchmaker, maybe not like Match.com, if anybody remembers that, or, nobody's doing swiping on their phones, but we are really, really very much looking at what dog is going to be suited to what person. Some dogs love the challenge of the city. Some dogs would rather be on the farm. We want to match that to that individual person. When we make that match, there's 2 ways that person can receive their guide dog. They can either come to Yorktown Heights, everything's free to that person who's blind, or we'll bring a dog out to them. Again, they pay nothing. And we bring the dog anywhere in the United States or Canada, and Alaska, Hawaii, there's working guide dogs, just everywhere. And for the next 2 to 3 weeks, they will train together. Well, now the dog knows what to do. Now we've got to make sure the person has that toolkit to work with the dog. And those of us who are coming back, we've got to untrain some bad habits. Because you start to learn your dog, and you kind of, we all get a little lax and things once we get comfortable. So now you got the new dog, and you got to, some training techniques may have changed. And so then you graduate. But you don't, it's not it, that's not the end. We're always there for our graduates. We have staff who live across the country who will provide additional follow-up, help through challenges. We're there always to talk, and we're there through the entire retirement process. All of this that we do is completely funded by donations. We don't get government support. Everything we do is because of the generosity of people, corporations, foundations who make it possible. And we couldn't do this without our incredible volunteers and that generosity of time. We have over 1,500 volunteers. At any given time, there's 400 puppies with puppy raisers, countless home socializers, 150 guide dogs being trained, and people getting trained with their guide dogs. It's a constant cycle, and supply chain's maybe not the right word, but a runway that's really, really long, right? The runway is over 2 years long before that dog becomes a guide dog. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do. I'll just talk a little bit about a couple of do's and don'ts when you see somebody with a guide dog, and then of course if anybody has questions, because I talk really fast, you can ask me. So when you see a person who has a guide dog out and about, the biggest number 1 do is to actually pretend like the dog's not there. So you don't want to call the dog. You don't want to make kissing sounds with the dog. You don't want to pet the dog or feed the dog or anything, because that dog has to focus on that person. And as you recall, these dogs love people. They love food. They've been around this all their lives. So they have a really hard job to do. And if I'm walking down the hall and somebody's dangling a brownie at me, I might just want to go see that brownie instead of taking my mail to the mailbox, So it's similar for the dogs, and we don't want to put that person's safety in jeopardy by distracting the dog. What you can do, of course, is say hello to the person. And you can feel free to talk to them. It's always nice when you say hi. If you know the person, hi Rebecca, this is Amy from the Rotary Club. Now I can identify who I'm talking to, because we're not very good with voices. Some people are amazing. I'm still like, wait, who's that? So that's always helpful, because we are all normal people who just happen to be blind and interact with the world a different way. Another thing you can do is you can always ask if somebody needs assistance. And they may say, no, I'm good, and that's fine. They may say, yes, I would love assistance. And then it's, okay, how can I assist you? Sometimes people will say, can you give me directions to the bathroom? Which could be, once you reach the end of the hallway, make a right. Okay, and then you'll make a right again in about 15, 20 feet, and that'll be the bathrooms. Or they may say, would you mind going with me? And they may want to follow you, walk beside you, or they might say, can I take your arm? And that's kind of like human guide, where you would just, lead them a bit. Maybe it's a really atrium type place. It's really massive. It's not a very straight way for the dog to find their way. It's like a big terminal or something. But those are some of the things that you can really easily, do to assist somebody or to interact with somebody. And yeah, the dogs are amazing and adorable, and sometimes we will let you pet them, but it all depends on the person and the dog, because really in that dog's journey, it's one dog may just be so distracted by people that I just can't, I just know my dog well. Another dog may not even give one iota whether they're being pet or not, and so a person might be more interested in saying, well, let me just take the harness off, or let me give that dog a command that they can say hi, and yeah, of course you can say hello. So it's really just talking to that person and seeing what's best for them. And with that, any questions?
Rebekah, you as a director of donor relations, how do you go about raising funds for, because Guiding Eyes is an amazing organization and you do a lot of work free of charge to people who need dogs. How do you go about raising funds for the organization?
Absolutely. So myself, I work with people one-on-one who want to make an impact with their philanthropy. So that's I love to build relationships with our amazing supporters. That's really important. Having visits, meetings, phone calls, emails. We have a direct mail program that we send out. People will leave Guiding Eyes in their legacy plans. That's an amazing thing. We have corporate sponsors, and those who want to get involved with our cause on the corporate level. Maybe it's co-branding, maybe it's becoming a sponsor for one of our events, or just in general. We work with foundations, regional, national. We do it all. We don't leave any stone unturned. That's legal. No, I'm kidding. But we don't leave any stone unturned. And we want, my whole goal is to be there to assist people who want to make that kind of an impact with making the impact that they want. So I'm there to be a resource and to help and to really spread awareness of Guiding Eyes. We even have, in September, we do a wagathon every year, which is a cumulative marathon of 26.2 miles. You don't have to do it all at once. But it's kind of a digital thing, and people will create a DIY kind of fundraiser, or they'll have a team and they'll say, I want to raise $300 or whatever the case may be, and then they walk and add or run and add their miles to that, while letting folks know, hey, I really love this cause and this is what I'm doing. So that's one of the ways also, but there's a myriad of ways, and we anything from $1 up to $10 million is greatly appreciated and will make a huge impact.
Rebekah, how often is there a situation where the dog and the person do not gel and you have to replace the dog, or has there been so much work in advance that rarely happens?
It does happen from time to time, and there's a couple of, it's about 80% or so who make it like beyond 2 years, right? Which is what we call really successful. But there is those 15, 20% sometimes. It's pretty rare for it to happen in class, right? Because we really do try to get that match right. But sometimes when people go home and they may not realize what it entails. It's a lot of work to have a guide dog. It's not a GPS. You don't just punch a number to the dog's brain and off you go. There's, you have to take care of this dog. The dogs are dogs at the end of the day. They all have their own little distractions. So sometimes they don't gel, and we will try to reissue those dogs to people that they will gel with and work with that individual to get them the dog that is right for them. But we really try to minimize that as much as possible. In fact, I might even be inflating it with that 20% number, because off the top of my head, it's just an approximation. It's really, we really want to make that match right, because there's a lot of resources that go into it. And we don't want to, we want to be good stewards of what's been invested in us and what's been invested in these dogs. But there's also times that this happens occasionally, where you take your walk in your interview and you're really nervous because you haven't walked without your cane in a long time, and you're like, this is about how comfortable I am. Then you get that guide dog and you're like, oh, this is great, I can walk fast again. Now you're walking faster than your dog. And so we might have to make a switch in class, because we're like, okay, really, you thought you walked this speed, but you actually walk a quarter of a mile faster. So those are the types of things we look at. But again, we really want to mostly be able to address those types of challenges in the field. So that's why we have those individuals across the country who can come and say, okay, you're having this challenge, how can we work this out, right? Like, how can we help you through this challenge you have? It could be just a communication breakdown between you and the dog's trying to show you something. You don't know the dog's trying to show you something, or it could be opposite, and more rarely, once in a while, you have like a medical thing that might crop up that we didn't see beforehand.
Rebekah, is there any other organization that does what Guiding Eyes does, or are you unique?
So there are a few. We are members of the International Guide Dog Federation, which is a conglomerate of various guide dog organizations throughout the world. I'd say there's probably like 5 larger, larger meaning like Guiding Eyes size, a little bit smaller, a little bit larger, throughout the country. We work with them on things like our breeding and genetics and things like that. But it's not so much a question of, yes, we're unique in that we are the only ones with a guide running program. We're unique in that we really try to work with people who have additional challenges. But we're also, as a whole movement, know that there's only like a couple of % of people who are blind who even have guide dogs. There's so much more demand than supply that we know that we're not so much competitors as we're collaborators.
So why are people hesitant if they could benefit from a guide dog? What's the holding back?
For some people, they maybe are nervous about, even just owning a dog. For some people, they may not feel comfortable doing things independently, or getting out and about. For some people, they lose their sight maybe much later in life, and they just, they've got some family around and they're comfortable with that. And then there are some people who make a choice and they say, I'd rather just use my cane. And the guide dog lifestyle we know isn't for everybody. I personally think it's the best thing ever. And there's a lot of other people who would like that too. But we know that there's such a small percentage of people who have them. There's a waiting list for every one of these organizations, and it's a long waiting list. And so how do we make more guide dogs, right? So that's the goal.
Thank you.
Rebekah, I mentioned earlier to you that my daughter did the Guiding Eyes program in New Canaan. She did it for her senior project, so she had a baby dog, the baby program. And I can tell you all that, Guiding Eyes is on top of you all the time. Like, they're a really well-run organization, and you have to do a lot of reporting back to them, and they give you a lot of different things that you need to do with the dog. It was very rewarding for our family to sort of take it on. My question though to you is, I know that when they have these different litters that come out, and they get from the baby to the next program up, the baby handlers, how many of those dogs are actually making it through to that next step? Because I know that there was some that don't make it, and they have to, they get either put back into their families or they go somewhere else. That's I think what happens with the long runway, but some of these dogs just aren't making it either, so it's harder for the organization. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure, it's a really good question. So once the puppies are placed with their puppy raisers, the majority of them will make it through the puppy raising program, because it's a very, it's not super stressful for that dog. We want to give them a lot of experiences, but it's very few that maybe have something medical where really we can tell them behaviorally they're not going to want to do it. The majority do make it through. I'd say even the majority make it through the infiltrating test. It's probably 95% make it through. Where we really start to see the challenges for the dogs is during that formal harness training, because again, it starts off really, really easy. The dogs love it, and then as it progresses, we put more responsibility on that dog. They have to be independent thinkers. They have to take more responsibility, and now they can't get as much support from their person. And so some of the dogs who really need that support from the person, and they can show with their behavior that they're not comfortable in that career. Similarly, occasionally, we're really strict about medically what we put out, because we know that our graduates, We have no income requirements, there's no charge. We have people who, they have very low incomes to people with very high incomes. But no matter what gamut of that, you also have, people have lives, right? So if you get a dog who has a lot of, they might not even be major, but like a minor medical challenge, we don't want to put that on the outset and say, well, here's your guide dog, but you're gonna have to go to the vet 5 times a year and get, this looked at. So we'll release a dog that has allergies that are pretty, like ongoing. Or release a dog that gets too many ear infections. Some of these things you won't see until they're young adults. Dog who, once they get into training, they get some GI upset. And we're like, okay, is that stress or is that because they need to be on a special food? But if they need to be on a special food, who knows who's going to get this dog and can they afford $200 a month? We don't know because we're going to make the dog the best match for the dog and the person. So we'll release those dogs. So once they come into the program, it's about half that will make it to become guide dogs once they're in training. So the breakdown's about 450 pups born a year. About 400 will go to puppy raisers. This is over a 2-year process, and then you get like 3 1/4 or so end up starting training. Plus, 75 of them will go become breeders, and then about half of those at the end of that 2 years become the 150 guide dogs. So those who do not make it as guide dogs, a lot of them do find alternate careers. We work with a lot of law enforcement detection, so search and rescue, electronics detection. You see the dogs on the train, you see them in the airports. We have a lot of partners in that regard, and also other service dog schools. Guide work happens to be a pretty difficult service for a dog. It takes a really special dog, not that the others don't, but if you have a dog that does retrieval, for example, somebody's in a wheelchair, that person, if the dog is getting weirded out by something they see, that person will also be able to see, okay, my dog needs this support right now because it's getting a little weirded out by that fire hydrant, and I can encourage it. Whereas I wouldn't see that. I would, what's the dog doing this for? I don't know. So that's why the dog needs to be able to work through stuff like that as a guide dog. Whereas if they're in a different kind of a service, they can get a little bit more hand or support.
Rebekah, one last question. How many years on average do you work?
So the average is about 7 or 8 years. So, the dogs usually retire anywhere between 9 and 11. And it depends on the dog. Some dogs do show signs that they'd like an early retirement. Some dogs get a little bit of medical stuff as they get older. But the average is about that 7, 8, 9 years.
Well, Rebekah, Regal, Madison, thank you so much for joining us. Right here, some brochures and
Does this have gin or vodka in it?
I wouldn't drink that. And yeah.
Thank you so much.
And Regal has a couple of kids cards, so if anybody wants one of those.
yeah, I want Regal. Thank you so much.